In this video we're going to take a look at air anti-lock braking systems and also some ATC systems, which is automatic traction control. So what's the purpose of ABS? Well, it's to keep control of the vehicle so that we get even braking. So we talked about when we have a wheel in motion and when we have a wheel that's static. So anti-lock brake systems prevent a wheel from going static. It keeps it in motion by releasing air out of the system. And how this is done is through speed sensors, modulator valves, and an ECU. So again, without ABS we can lose control of the vehicle very easily, but with the ABS system on, it monitors each of the wheel speeds, and with that, when we're making a brake application, it can release the air pressure to allow that wheel to keep rotating. What do we have in most of the ABS systems? Well, we're going to have a speed sensor. So it's a tone wheel and a pickup, and it counts the amount of teeth. And what happens is it depends on how we have it set up. For instance, if we'll have one on each steer axle, and we can have one on each drive axle, or we can have a modulator that controls each left and right side. And with that, it sends a signal back to an ECU, which compares each of the wheel speeds to each other. And if one of them is locking up, it can actually, the ECU can release the air pressure off that wheel and allow it to spin free, and then make an application, and this will cycle off and on as long as the wheel speed is different until it maintains the same wheel speed as the others. So what we have from our ECU, we go out to a relay valve. Now the relay valve has an electronic component to it, which is an ABS modulator valve. So when I make a brake application, if everything works right, air goes out to my brake pots and it slows me down. But what happens when a tone wheel senses that we have a wheel that is not spinning as fast as the others? What that will do is release the brake pressure to this side of the brake, or the vehicle, and allow those wheels speeds to catch up to the others. We'll also get an indicator lamp inside the cab to tell us that our ABS is activated. And one of the things that when we first start a vehicle up, we turn the key on, we'll hear the ABS cycle. You'll hear it go click, 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 as it cycles through each of the modulator valves. Now, as long as the test works fine, we don't have an issue. But if there's a problem with one of the modulator valves, the ABS won't work. It will throw a fault code, and with that fault code, the ABS will not be active, but we still have our braking system normally. It's just we don't have the ABS with it. Now, how our ABS is set up? Well, again, it all depends on how we want to have it up. We could have two sensors with one modulator valve, so that would be 2S, 1M. What we see most common is 4S, 4M. So we'll have one on each steer axle, and then we'll have one on each drive axle. Now, even if we have a tandem drive axle, what it does is splits left and right on the drives. Or we could have 6S, 4M, which means that on a tandem drive, each wheel will have its own sensor, and our modulators will be set up for one side. Or we could have a 6S, 6M, where each one is controlled independently. So when we're taking a look at the tone wheel, so the tone wheel is part of the drum. So as the wheel is rotating, there's a sensor that's picking up all the teeth on this tone wheel. Now with that, it sends a signal back to the ECU, and that will give you a frequency. So when we have our sensor and it's picking up the tone wheel, it sends an AC signal back to the ECU, and that ECU compares that signal to the signals from the other wheels. And again, if there's a problem, it will release the air pressure, but only when we're making a brake application. Now what about setting up the sensors? So all it is a permanent magnet with a coil of wire around it. Now what we do with these sensors is we push them in and leave them. We don't pull them back at all. It'll set itself automatically close to the tone ring. So again, when we're taking a look at these, if we have an issue, a couple things can happen is if it gets pushed out, if this spring clip for any reason gets worn out or corrodes, the sensor could come away from the tone ring. What will happen in a case like that is we'll get a fault code, and we can read the fault code with a bunch of different components. We can do a flash code check on the ABS system. We can hook up a laptop to it or a ProLink, and with that we can say, oh, okay, well the left front wheel sensor is out of range, so we can go in and we can reset it. So what other things can cause a tone ring to come out, or a sensor to come out away from the tone ring? If we get a lot of contamination on the tone ring itself, for instance, if we have a wheel seal that's leaking and it picks up brake dust, it will finally move that sensor far enough away that it can't pick up the tone ring, and so we'll end up with an ABS fault code. What we'll see for a modulator assembly is these are attached, they can be attached directly to the relay valve, or they can be independent. And then we're going to have an electrical connector to it. So air supplied in and out to the brake. So when everything's working normally, air will just go straight through this component and out to the brake. It's when we have a fault that the ABS senses that we have a wheel speed difference that this is going to activate. So again, we can have a relay valve with our ABS modulators on each side with these hookups. Just a note that when we're putting these hookups on, dielectric grease around these threads to help seal them, make them easier to get off later. So how does an ABS modulator work? So air comes in a normal operation, air will come in, go through, and out to the delivery port. Now we have two solenoids in each of the modulator valves. So as a normal operation, this one will be up closing off this port, this one will be down closing off this exhaust port. When we have a fault, what happens is this solenoid moves down, this one moves up. So now air can get through here up over top and close off this here, so no more air can get in. This one opens up the exhaust. Now air can cycle out through here and out through the exhaust. So if we take a look at how both of them look, so with air getting underneath this diaphragm, it holds it off here, prevents any air getting out the exhaust port, closes off this exhaust. This one here, there's no air above it, so air pushes past this diaphragm. And this is a normal operation. But once it's activated, this is what happens. There's also a hold position in the modulator valve. And what happens is this solenoid valve will go down and close off the exhaust, creating equal pressure on both sides. No more air is delivered in, but no more air is released. So this is what's called the hold position. ECU, some of them will also have a blink code switch, so sometimes underneath the dash you can flip this, and on the ABS light it will give you a flash code, and with that flash code you can find out where the fault is. So on the dash, we're going to have an ABS light. So when we turn the key on, the ABS light can come on. It will run through its sequence of tests. As long as the tests come out good, the ABS light will go out. If the ABS light is on, then we have a fault somewhere. On a trailer, what we're going to do is we're going to have an ABS indicator light, and it can be on the back left-hand corner, or it can be on the front corner, but most of them you're going to see on the back left-hand corner. And what we're going to have is an ECU that's attached to the frame rail somewhere on the vehicle. Now this is powered up through the blue wire. So if you take a look at the 7-wire plug, the center wire, which is the blue wire of the accessory, it's going to feed that ECU. And again, the ECU is going to monitor wheel speeds, and if we have an issue, it's going to do the same as it does on the tractor. If when we turn the key on and power up, same thing on the trailer. It will go through its sequence of tests to make sure that everything works right. If it doesn't, this indicator light will stay on. And this is an amber light. Now on some of the ABS units, they will have this type of a setup where they will show where there's a fault. It'll tell you where the voltage is, and I'm going to go through and how to reset this one. Is set up so you're going to use a magnet to go in, and we can go in and we can reset this if we have a problem. And you just bring your magnet up close to this and it will reset it. We can also use what's called a ProLink. This is an older version. Now we use a laptop to go in and we can check fault codes. So if we take a look at our 7-wire plug, number 1 is our ground, number 7 is our blue wire, and that is our power feed back to the ABS. And again, anytime we have a fault, ABS is really, it's there but it's not working, and we just revert back to normal braking. So, you know, some of the quick easy checks are we getting power with the key turned on to the blue wire to feed the ABS? So if I turn my key on and I get nothing back to the ABS, the light doesn't come on, it doesn't do its test. It could be a simple matter of number 7 isn't getting power fed to it back to the ECU. Now, automatic traction control is the opposite of ABS. And what happens with ATC is if the ECM shows up a wheel spin, it will apply the brakes to that wheel. And with that, it sends power to the other drive wheel on the opposite side. So if one wheel is slipping on some ice, it will send the power so we get traction on the opposite side. So instead of taking air away, it's applying air to the brakes. Now there's also an override switch on the dash that you can override this ATC. So depending on how the ATC is programmed, it will allow a certain amount of wheel slip before it applies the brakes, because again, if we're stuck in a mud hole, we may end up with a little bit of wheel slip here and there, but we don't want the brakes applying, otherwise we're going to get stuck. Okay, and that's it for ABS and ATC systems, and we'll discuss this more in the shop.